Today we enter a room of parting, a space grown to hold words spoken at the edge of distance, where promises were shaped and farewells were meant to remain light. But in the Yewdeep, the weight of those words has begun to accumulate, and the chamber will learn a limit it did not know that it had.
The Yewdeep sits quietly and unobserved by none but its residents, below the remnants of the Durn yew, the marchlands largely unaware of its workings. Retta had been there for many seasons, which he had spent helping to hold its walls, passages, floors and chambers in balance. He always knew the room before he saw it. That area had a different smell and a cold edge to it. The roots there were also smoother and grown with more care than most other passages. This room had been made for mercy, long before mercy needed so many rules. Retta stopped there, took the resin from the bowl and greased the door with it, stepping through when it opened. The chamber had no corners, no shelves and no alcoves for storage. It was a room built for bodies and words. The first thing he always did was listen for the quality of the silence. Silence in the Yewdeep was never completely empty, but in this chamber the silence had begun to alter in different ways, because it was now resenting being disturbed. Retta moved to the centre and stood still. He did not carry tools or bring symbols. The work of closing came from presence, decision, and permission, and he could not force any of it. He could only act in the very moment the chamber could no longer bear. He had been back 3 times in the last season, and each time the chamber felt strange. Then he had seen the first one. A man and a woman had come in, ordinary enough to his eye, and dressed in travel-stained cloth. They had stood very close together at first, close in that way lovers are before they decide whether touching will make leaving easier or impossible. Retta had waited near the wall, his eyes lowered. He was not there to be judge or priest. He existed so the room could do what it was meant to do, and not tear itself apart while it did it. The woman had spoken first. "I'll come back. I swear it." It was the swearing that did it, the sealing of her intent. Retta had felt the air change, and behind the man, where there had been nothing, there was now someone. A shape with presence, standing too close to the wall and half grown into it. The figure had wet hair clinging to his forehead, and a dark wound at his throat that did not bleed, but neither did it close. He was staring at the space between himself and the couple, waiting for something. Retta had just looked away, forcing his face back into stillness before either of the living beings there could catch anything. When the man and woman had left, the figure had remained there briefly and then faded back into the root wall, leaving no trace. After that, Retta had returned alone and stood in the room for hours, waiting in vain for it to happen again. Since then, the presences had come more often, always during farewells, always at the moment a promise was made that could not be kept. They never spoke or moved toward the living. Being seen seemed not to be their purpose. Retta stood there now and felt the room around him, hearing them before they reached the door. 2 sets of steps, one light and one heavier, a difference in gait that told him more than any glance would. The lighter steps slid, and the other set hesitated, and Retta drew back to the wall, becoming the quiet witness once more. The two entered together, with a Fey man coming first. He was slender, and his face carried that unsettling stillness the Fey possessed. He wore a short cloak with a thorn-shaped clasp that glimmered. The mortal followed, his clothes patched in the manner of someone who personally repaired what he had. His hands were calloused, and his eyes were tired. Retta did not need the details to understand what this was, because he had seen it too many times before. Here was a parting with unequal weight, one who would outlast, one who might not. They stopped in the centre, and Retta watched the room almost as much as he watched them. The mortal spoke first. "This is the last place you wanted to stand." "It's the only place the Yew allows for this," the Fae said, "or at least it used to." "Evidently it still does," the mortal replied. Retta felt a slight pull, and recognized it as the chamber's response to assertion. The room did not like such confidence, or being told what it was any more. The Fae lifted his hand toward the mortal's cheek, then stopped short. He looked at his own hand, and in that pause Retta saw in him that fear of going further, and perhaps crossing a line. "You could come," the mortal said. "You could walk with me, just for a time. I don't ask you to stay." The Fae looked toward the root wall. "Above hurts me," he said. "You know that." "I know it's hard," the mortal replied. "I didn't know that it hurts, though." The Fae recognized the mortal's limitations. "You have a body built for the sun," he said. "I do not." The mortal moved closer until they occupied the same space, and for a moment the chamber felt almost like it was supposed to, quiet and contained. Retta had no right to be moved, and yet the room was doing it for him, feeding him the value and importance of their words even before they were spoken. "Then stay," the mortal said, "but don't speak like it's already ended." "It has not ended," the Fae said, and for an instant the room eased. Those were careful words, true words, and short of promise. Then the mortal, tired and stubborn, said what mortals always said when they could not bear further doubt. "I'll come back for you," he said. "I'll find a way. I swear it." Retta's skin prickled, and the room seemed to lurch as the air took on that cold edge again. Behind the mortal, the wall's smooth curve darkened, and a figure stood where there had been nothing. It was a woman this time, or what remained of one. She looked like she had just risen from deep water. Her hair hung wet down her back, and her dress clung to her body. One arm was missing below the elbow, and her eyes were fixed on the Fae. The Fae glanced aside, and for a terrifying moment Retta thought he had seen her too, but he looked at the wall itself, clearly unaware of the woman. His expression was either disgust or grief. Retta couldn't tell. "You mustn't swear here," he said. The mortal blinked. "Why?" The Fae's hand lifted and pressed to the mortal's chest. "Because this room remembers too well," he said, "and it does not understand when people promise and do not return." Retta felt his stomach drop. The Fae knew. Not in the precise way Retta did, but enough to tell the truth while it mattered. The mortal swallowed, his eyes wet now, though he did not cry. "Then what can I say?" The Fae's fingers pressed harder against him. "Say what is true," he said. "Say only what you can carry." The mortal looked at the Fae's hand on his chest. "I will try," he said. "I will try to come back." The room responded to the conditional words, and Retta felt the change, but the figure behind the mortal did not fade. It remained and watched as the living spoke, until another shape began to gather beside it, deeper in the wall. Retta could see that it was happening faster now, and that the presences were accumulating. The mortal's shoulders slumped. "I don't want to leave you in here," he said, and the confession carried fear this time. "I am not in here," the Fae said. "I am with you until you go." "And when I'm gone?" The Fae paused. "Then you will be gone," he said. He had lived too long to lie. The mortal shook his head. "No," he said. "No, that's not—" Behind the mortal, the second shape solidified. The same young man, hair plastered to his forehead and a dark wound at his throat. Retta recognized him, but now he was clearer, and it terrified Retta because the room was learning how to keep them. The Fae looked again to the wall, this time seeing the wounded man and pointing. "This is why I did not want to come here." The mortal turned his head. "What is it?" The Fae hesitated. Retta could have spoken and ended the confusion, but this was not his farewell. "They are the ones who promised and never returned," the Fae said. The mortal's face drained. "Dead?" he whispered. The Fae's hand slid up to cup the mortal's jaw. "Yes," he said, "and the you keeps them because it does not know what else to do with the promise." The mortal's eyes squeezed shut. "That's not right," he said. "No," the Fae replied, "it isn't." Retta shuddered because a third presence began to gather behind the Fae. It was faint at first, but he could see that it was older than the others. Its outline was less human, and its face almost featureless. It stood very close to the Fae, just behind his shoulder. This was new. The chamber had always anchored the dead behind the one who left. It had held those who had failed to return as a warning, but now it was gathering behind the one who remained. The Fae sensed it, but did not turn or look. His voice sounded strained when he spoke again. "We should go," he said. The mortal's hands lifted and hovered near the Fae's waist, ready to grab him and refuse movement. "Not yet," he said. "Not yet." "If we stay," the Fae said, "it will keep more." "What?" the mortal rasped. The Fae swallowed. "It will keep you," he said, fear breaking through his composure. "Or it will keep what you become when you don't come back." For the first time, Retta knew that the room had reached its limit, and he must intervene. He stepped forward enough to be noticed. "That's enough," he said. The mortal had forgotten Retta was there. "Who are you?" The Fae replied for him. "He's a custodian of these chambers," he said. Retta did not offer his name. "This room will close," he said. "It is closing now. If you have words left, speak them carefully." The mortal stared at him angrily. "You can't!" "I can," he said, "because the you can. I am only here to see it done." The Fae's hands slid down to take the mortal's hands, fingers interlacing. "Do what you always do," he said. "I will go," the mortal said, "and I will possibly live long enough to regret it. I won't bind you with words I cannot pay for. If I can come back," he said, "I will." The Fae closed his eyes. "That is all then," he whispered. "That is enough." The room had been made for this, the final clasp, the honest words. and yet it was now poisoned by every promise that had never been fulfilled. Behind them the ghosts remained. The woman with the wet hair watched the Fae. The young man with the throat wound watched the space between them, and the older, blurred shape stood close enough that its shadow merged with theirs. The mortal released the Fae's hands slowly and stepped back, but the Fae did not follow. "Go," said Retta. "Now, make haste." The mortal looked at Retta with something close to hatred, because he needed someone to blame without destroying the person he loved. Retta accepted it. Hatred was easier than despair anyway. The mortal turned and walked out, and the corridor swallowed him. The Fae remained in the chamber, alone with Retta. He stood very still, staring at the doorway. The ghosts did not fade with the mortal's departure. They remained, and worse, they turned their attention now toward the Fae. The chamber did not understand who had gone and who had stayed. It only understood the words that had been spoken. The Fae spoke first. "It's close," he said. Retta nodded. "Yes." "When you seal it," the Fae said, "what happens to them?" Retta hesitated. He had never said the answer aloud, because saying it made it more real. But the Fae deserved the truth. "It stops holding them," he said. "They vanish?" Retta shook his head. "No, they are released." The Fae looked toward where the woman stood, half grown into root. "To where?" "I don't know," Retta admitted. "Not to us." He stepped into the centre. The Fae looked at him. "You're staying?" he said. Retta nodded. "I have to," he replied. "It closes more firmly if I'm inside." "And you can get out?" "I can," Retta said, "if the U allows it." He did not recite anything or make any ceremonial gestures. He placed both palms on the root wall and said, "Enough," to the room. The word fell dead, but something in the fibres responded, and Retta closed his eyes. He let his mind fill with what the chamber had been for. The hundreds of farewells spoken there, their names not remembered. He did not see lovers, siblings and comrades. He felt the remains of the partings, the moment when two people stand and decide that distance is inevitable. He opened his eyes and looked directly at the ghosts. The woman with wet hair stared back, and the young man with the throat wound watched intently. The older, blurred figure behind the Fae remained still. Retta did not speak to them or offer apologies. His job was not to mend the wrongs done to them. His job was to stop the U from breaking itself trying. He turned toward the Fae. "Go," he said. The Fae nodded, then turned and slipped out, leaving Retta alone with the dead. He kept both palms where they were. The ghosts did not move toward him or change expression. He recalled the first chamber he had closed, many seasons before, a narrow corridor that had begun to twist back on itself until it led only in circles. Closing that had felt like relief, but his did not. It felt more like betrayal. The young man with the throat wound flickered, and he looked toward Retta. Then the woman with wet hair lifted her remaining hand slowly and sank into the wall like it was water. Her whole form then softened and dissolved to nothing. The young man faded too, his wound darkening, his hair lifting, and a look of bewilderment across his face. The older figure behind where the Fae had stood remained the longest. "Enough," Retta said again, louder now, and this time the words seemed to land. The older figure shuddered, its outline breaking apart into strands that were taken by the wall. Then it was gone, and the chamber was empty. The woven fibres of the root walls began to knit, like muscle becoming tendon, becoming bone. The room was no longer meant to hold bodies. It was becoming a scar. Retta made for the doorway and stopped just beyond it to look back. The opening behind him had already changed. Where there had been a doorway, there was now a shallow dead end. It was no longer a room. Retta stared at it for a long time, knowing he had done what must be done, and that it would not be the last time. He walked away, imagining the farewells that would now be spoken elsewhere, in corridors not meant to hold them, and in rooms grown for other purposes. He imagined words spilling into places that would not contain them, and the dead gathering where they were not expected. He kept walking until the sap lights were fewer, and the Yewdeep held its silence, and he wondered how many farewells it would be forced to learn from, before it began closing more than just rooms alone.
You see, the custodian always knew that promises spoken with love still bind the world that hears them, and when too many are left unpaid, even a place built for mercy must know when to close.